Hey there, friends. Today we are talking about the top 5 mistakes that new goat owners make. The things I wish someone had told me before I brought home my first dairy goats about 8 years ago. Hi, I'm Sarah from the Nest in the West. I'm a homeschool mom and I run a small flower farm on my homestead here in Phoenix, Arizona. I also raise mini Nubian dairy goats and I teach homesteaders the art of making beautiful goat milk cheese. If you're new to dairy goats or just hoping to feel a little more confident, then this video is for you. So we brought home our first dairy animals about 8 years ago. It was a pair of Jersey cows, and I pretty quickly decided that I didn't feel like waiting about 9 months for them to have their first calves to begin getting our first homestead dairy. So we pretty quickly brought home a little mini Nubian dairy goat, and I fell head over heels for milking and for goats and for all things dairy. These days, all of our dairy needs are met by our beloved herd of mini Nubians. Over the years, I've helped lots of beginners get started with goats, and currently I'm writing a book all about raising dairy goats holistically for Lion's Press. So I've seen firsthand where new goat owners tend to struggle. There's a few common mistakes I see beginners make, and quite honestly, there's a lot of bad information online out there. But I want you to succeed and feel confident right from the start and not have to learn these lessons the hard way. So without further ado, let's get into the top 5 mistakes I see new goat owners making. And I think the last one might just surprise you. Okay, so the first mistake that I commonly see new goat owners making is giving sweet feed as their goat's primary source of feed. So you can call it sweet feed. Sometimes it's labeled goat feed, which is confusing, right? If you go to like a Tractor Supply or somewhere, often they have a big bag labeled goat feed. And that is not, it's not even a great source of feed, quite honestly, but it's also just not what your goat needs as their primary source of nutrients in their diet. So goats are ruminants, they are browsers. They're intended to eat lots of grass or hay and tree fodder and bushes and all of the things that they might find walking around a pasture or a big space of land or a mountain. They will not thrive, and they'll actually probably get sick if mostly what they're eating is something like a sweet feed. So if you keep your goats on a pasture like we do, you're probably gonna have to supplement them with some alfalfa pellets or alfalfa hay. Dairy goats, particularly the does, really benefit from having alfalfa in their diet. Not only does it help make the milk taste really nice and sweet, it's also a really great source of protein and calcium, which are really important for goats that are lactating or pregnant, which if you have dairy goats, that's like 95% of their life. If you keep your goats on a dry lot, like we keep our bucks in a pen, they're not on pasture with the rest of the herd, they're going to need a grass hay. Our bucks only get grass hay. If you've got does on a dry lot, they're gonna need some alfalfa too. And it's really great if you can bring in some browse or some fodder for them, whether that's some limbs you cut off of trees, or even if you're mowing your lawn and it's an untreated lawn, you can give them the grass clippings from that or the weeds as you pull them out of your garden. Anything that is not poisonous and that is beneficial for goats to eat, they'll really love if you can toss that over the fence for them. When it comes to grain, I don't recommend sweet feed even for your dairy goats that are on the stand and you give them a grain ration. Barley is going to be the very best thing for dairy goats. I kind of go into that a little bit more in a video. I'll link it right up here, all about how to milk your goat, and I talk about the grain ration that we give our goats when they're on the milk stand. But if you can find some sort of dairy goat ration, that is going to be the best thing for them. Hopefully it's a barley-based feed. And if you don't have something like that in your area, it's not easy to find something like that at a Tractor Supply typically. We buy ours in with a group purchasing co-op from a place up in Montana, actually. You may have a grain mill near you that makes something that's great for dairy cows or dairy goats. But if you don't have that option, you can actually mix your own. And if you need a recipe for that, check out the link in the description. I have a free resource for you. It's my recipe for mixing a good, balanced dairy goat ration. Okay, mistake number 2. I think this is a big one that I see, and it is not fully thinking through the time commitment, the space commitment, maybe the noise possibilities of bringing home dairy goats. So I know I didn't fully understand these things when we brought home our first goats. And in fact, we made the mistake mistake of bringing home just one goat and assuming that she would be friends with our cows. And we very quickly realized that that was not the case, and we needed to bring her home a little goat buddy for her to be happy and not crying all the time and sneaking out to try and find us because she figured we were better friends than the cows were. I see this sort of thing a lot with beginners. They see the sweet little baby goats and they love the idea of fresh milk in the kitchen on a daily basis, but they don't always think through the logistics, the amount of time and effort it's going to take to care for your dairy animal, to milk them daily, to process that milk. There's just so much to think through, and it's one of those things that I don't think you can fully understand until you're in it. But it is something to really consider before bringing home your dairy animals. I think it's really helpful to think ahead about what your goals are with goats. Do you plan on keeping their babies? Do you have room for that? If you don't right now, do you have room to sort of add on to your current setup to have room for that in the future? Do you plan to keep a buck? Do you know what you're gonna do with the extra milk? Do you have the capacity to learn how to make yogurt and how to make cheese and fit that into your weekly rhythm? Do you have a plan for bucklings? Are you going to sell them? Are you going to raise them up for meat? That's something a lot of people don't consider. I think it's really important to think about the time commitment for milking too. Not just how long it will take to milk one goat or two, but the amount of time it takes to process the milk. And if you're selling it, it takes time to reach out to people and have them come and buy it. Or if you're processing it into yogurt and cheese and that sort of thing, that takes time too. These are things that's wise to consider ahead of time. Another thing I don't think beginners often think about is, do you have the capacity to care for your animals when something goes wrong? Now, I know it's not something that we need to plan for as part of your regular rhythms with dairying, but it is wise to think about the unexpected things that might come up. Would you have time to bottle feed baby goats? Do you have the capacity to handle vet bills and treating an ill animal if you need to? Just something to consider before you just bring home new baby goats excited about the future. It's worth considering all of the things that go into caring for a dairy animal. Okay, number 3, starting with unregistered dairy animals. Now, this one might be a little bit controversial, but it goes along with the previous mistake I mentioned and not thinking ahead and not knowing what your long-term goals are. So hear me out. I'm not saying that everyone should have registered goats or that unregistered goats aren't worthwhile. That's actually not how I feel at all. This was a mistake I made though, and I just want to share candidly how it has affected me and our herd and our goals for our dairy goats, and how I might have done things differently if I could go back and change the clock. So my first goat is such a great girl. She's actually still here. Her name's Ginny, and she's almost 12 now, which is crazy. I'm so grateful for her and her genetics in my herd, and she's thrown some really beautiful doelings that have continued down her lines in my herd, and I love her. So she came from a family that raised their goats the same way I intended to, with more holistic practices. They had originally gotten her from a really great goat dairy here in town, so she had really great genetics to work with. I don't regret purchasing her one bit. She's one of my foundation does, like I said, and I love having her genetics in my herd. But she is unregistered. And what that has meant for my herd is that it has not been simple to register her kids. And I'll share a little bit more about why that's become important to me over the years. Because she wasn't registered, even though she could have been, her previous owners just didn't do it, and then the window was missed by the time I purchased her. Because she's not registered, I don't have a way to prove her quality genetics in my herd. I don't have proof of those. And what it means is that it's going to take generations for me to be able to properly register her with the herd book that I use. Right now, all of her doelings I'm able to register as grade because they have a registered sire, and we could go into so much when it comes to registering goats. It gets a little complicated, but the simple fact is I can't just easily register her offspring. They have to be registered as almost like a secondary class. So it's going to take generations for me to finally be able to register her offspring as F1 mini Nubians. It also means that for years, I didn't even consider registering her kids because I didn't even know that I could. And so I undersold them for really cheap prices, even though their genetics and my farm and everything about their quality was such that I could have been charging higher prices. It took a really long time for me to understand the system of registering dairy goats. And I really wrote it off for a long time as being kind of snobby and something that was really only there for people who intended to show their goats. Spoiler, I don't actually show my goats at all. But I have come around to the idea that registering goats is a really great thing. And I only purchase registered goats now, and I register all of my goats. I didn't realize the huge benefits to being able to track genetics, confirm what an owner is saying about their goats and their genetics, and being able to pass that on down the generations. So the way I like to think of it now is that if I need to be breeding my goats and having new kids on a yearly basis to continue having milk on my farm, I want to make sure that I'm bringing kids into the world that are of the highest quality, and I want to be able to sell them at premium prices. Registered goats help me accomplish both of these goals, and I do feel like I'm setting up the future owners of those kids for success as well. Okay, mistake number 4, discounting the benefits of a buck. Okay, I definitely made this mistake. I listened to all the people out there who talk about how nasty and smelly and gross bucks are, and I didn't want one, and I said I would never have one on my farm. And it took a few years of trying to find someone to breed my goats to, a buck that was the same breed as them, that came from a disease-tested herd, that had the genetics I was looking for, that had an owner that was willing to sire him out to me. It took a long time of searching for that and coming up short to realize that having a buck was actually a really beneficial thing if you're planning on breeding your goats on a yearly basis. So I finally decided to purchase my first buck, and I'm so glad that I did. They are not nearly as bad as everyone makes them out to be. They are sweet, they are personable. I love my bucks. We have 3 of them right now. They do get a little bit crazy around breeding season when they're in rut. They get smelly, they get crazy, but I like to think of that as them just doing their job, right? That's their one job, and they do it very well. And when it comes to their smell, I would actually describe it as like a musky scent, kind of like a very muted, skunky scent. And I don't know, they don't smell any worse than the cows do next door. So it's not even all year long. I think people make a big fuss about it. It's not that bad. And I have since come to the conclusion that bucks really are half your herd. If you need to have babies to have milk, you can only accomplish that one way. And so having a buck can be a really valuable asset on your farm, even if you have just a small herd. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to own a buck or that they're absolutely imperative to being able to keep dairy goats. I am just saying, though, that they are really beneficial, and maybe you don't get one your first year, but maybe you start thinking about it for the next. It can be a huge gift to your farm. So we keep 3 bucks right now, and that's because I breed down and I keep doelings from different generations, and so I need to be able to breed them without running into problems where we're inbreeding and that sort of thing. And so anyway, I have 3 bucks. They're all completely unrelated from my foundation does. They're from 3 different herds, and they bring a lot of really great aspects into my herd that I'm looking to improve upon in my does. So that's important too. If you bring in a buck, make sure he's an improvement on what you already have. Make sure he's going to be bringing in assets to your herd, and that his dam and grand dam have udders and qualities that you want to see in future doelings born on your farm. I really love that I have everything I need right here in house to keep milk coming on my homestead. All right, mistake number 5, and this one might surprise you. Mistake number 5 is following online advice rather than seeking a local mentor. Now, this might come as a bit of a shock because you are watching this video online right now. I am giving you advice, but hear me out. What I mean by this is not that you should discount every bit of advice that you receive online, but I do think there are a lot of topics and situations where you should value advice given from a local goat keeper or mentor over and above advice that you receive online. Let me explain. when it comes to parasite management, when it comes to pasture rotation, building shelters, deciding what the best month is ideally to have kids in. All of these things are really important topics, and you will get the best possible advice for your unique climate and situation and region by talking to someone local to you. So for example, here in my arid desert climate, we don't really have much parasite pressure. So my methods for controlling parasites in my herd are going to look very different from someone who has a goat herd in Georgia or Illinois or Maryland. Somewhere with a completely different climate than me. And so if you were to listen to what I am telling you that I do, it's not going to be a good fit for you and your climate with your herd. It doesn't mean that I can't give good advice on these topics, but I do think that the very best ideal situation is if you find someone local to you who is raising goats in a similar way that you intend to, and follow and get advice from what they're doing. Better yet, if you have not already purchased your goats, try and find a breeder who is local to you, who is raising goats in a way that you plan on. This is especially important if you, like me, are raising your goats in a holistic way or you intend to. Holistic care is a long game, and herd immunity strengthens, genetics improve, resilience compounds with each generation raised in that way. Goats also are amazing. They pass down knowledge generation to generation if they're able to raise their own young. And so what your goats know not to eat in the pasture, or what foods and things that they seek out when they know they're feeling off, they pass that on generation after generation. And so if you can find someone local to you raising goats in a similar way, you're going to really benefit from that. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever buy in goats from a different state or something like that. Those can be really great ways to improve the genetics in your herd and mix things up. But I am just talking about for beginners, this is an easy way to get that immunity, to get that mentorship, to have someone you can ask questions to when you run into problems, because you are going to run into issues. It's inevitable. But if you have someone that you can ask questions of, that becomes just such a game changer. Sometimes that person is online, and I don't mean to discount getting advice online or seeking out friends online who are raising animals the same way you do. That's such a gift, and I've benefited from it, and I hope I am blessing others with my knowledge as well. But I think it really is helpful if you can find someone local to you or in just a similar region and climate that can help inform decisions on some of those topics too. Okay, friends, so those are the top 5 mistakes I see beginner goat owners making all the time. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to dairy goats, you might want to check out my video on milking a goat. It's perfect for beginners, takes you through my whole process on how to milk a goat step by step. And don't forget to download that free grain ration recipe I mentioned earlier. You can find the link in the description to this video. I'm cheering you on in your goat journey. I'll see you in the next video.